It's Tuesday, March 19th at 10:36 a.m. and we're heading in to have a baby. How do you feel about it? Are you excited?
I'm very excited.
Are you nervous?
No, I'm just excited.
I'm terrified. So we're being induced. And here we go. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I can't believe I'm finally getting to make this video. Welcome to my labor and delivery story. I think my last update was at week 35, and basically at my 35-week appointment, everything just kind of got really chaotic, and from weeks 35 to 39, I'll do an update for you, but basically, so many different things happened. It was really dramatic, and I ended up having to be induced at 39 weeks, and my labor lasted 39 hours. Yeah, 39. No one could have predicted how long it would last. I know that with inductions, sometimes they take longer, and I kind of knew that going in, which is why I really fought hard not to be induced. It wasn't by choice. But because it was so long, I was terrified that I was going to need a C-section. Basically, once we hit like the 25 to 30 hour mark, I was convinced that, you know, they were going to just cut me open and take the baby. But luckily, everything they were doing, the baby's heart rate stayed perfect. Everything actually went really great. So they let me just continue to labor. And by the time I actually had to push, I had no epidural, no pain medication, and it was probably the most intense pain of my entire life. I thought I was going to die. But it was all worth it because I delivered a healthy baby girl, 7 pounds, 1 ounce, and it was worth it.
All right, can I have an update?
I'm on hour 21. I'm 5 centimeters, 80% effaced. And I'm tired.
Have you slept?
An hour.
An hour? Well, almost there. Love you.
Love you. So basically the day before I was induced, I had like a panic attack and refused to talk to my midwife, and I gave her my husband's number and said if she needed to reach me to talk to him because I hit a wall. Everything that happened between week 35 and 39, it was just too much to handle. I was considering changing providers at 39 weeks. I didn't understand why I was being induced, and I was just insanely frustrated, and I felt like I was being forced into an induction, and everything was just a mess. So that was on a Monday, and my midwife ended up calling my husband and asked if I would come in on Tuesday morning just to talk to her, and she thought like there was some miscommunications going on. So I agreed to go in the morning, Tuesday morning. I think we had like an 8 a.m. appointment. So we went in and talked to her, and basically I was misunderstanding because I had seen a maternal fetal medicine doctor and I thought the maternal fetal medicine doctor said I didn't need to be induced, but that wasn't accurate. So while we were at that appointment on Tuesday morning, she basically told me there's no point in waiting, you're 39 weeks, just get it over with, just be induced, have the baby, there's no point in going any longer. So she ended up calling the hospital while we were there and asked if they had any space for an induction, and they said to come right over. So everything just kind of happened really fast. So we left my midwife appointment, came home, I took a shower, had some breakfast because I knew I wouldn't be able to eat for a while, and we headed over to the hospital. And once we checking in probably took about like an hour. They gave me an IV. What else did they do? Did all my vitals, did blood work. And from there, they gave me my first dose of Cytotec. So Cytotec was something I was terrified to take. I Googled it too much. It just scared me. And I guess really if you think about it, any induction method's scary because it's not natural and your body isn't going into labor naturally. So they told me I could do either Cervidil or Cytotec, but they told me that the Cervidil takes, I think, 12 hours. And if I wanted to be there for 3 days, then I should do the Cervidil. But if I wanted to speed things up a little bit, to do the Cytotec. So I trusted the doctor that was there, and they gave me my first dose of Cytotec sometime around, like, I think noon, maybe a little afternoon. It's currently 3:30. I've had the Cytotec for almost 3 hours. My contractions are picking up, and we're just going from there. Some of them are painful and some of them aren't bad, but I'm scared for when they do get more painful and I don't know what to expect. And eating Reese's peanut butter cups, and I'm starving. For the cytotech, they leave it in for 4 hours. So after 4 hours, I got to a 2. I was 2 centimeters dilated, and I think like 60% effaced. So I was making progress. They told me I was responding beautifully to the cytotech. They called my midwife to see what the next step would be. So they decided to give me 1 more dose of cytotech to see if it progressed me anymore. They gave me my 2nd dose of cytotech, and we waited 4 hours, and I was having decent contractions the whole time. I could see them on the monitor. I could feel them. I didn't have any pain medication yet. And I was really excited because I thought, it would progress even quicker. I thought I was on the road to, a speedy labor and delivery. So at 4:51, they checked me again. That was when after my 2nd dose of cytotech, and I made no progress. I was still 2 centimeters dilated, 60% effaced, and I was like insanely disheartened because I thought because I had done 2 centimeters already, I thought I would double that and, be almost halfway there. But they told me that inductions do take a while, and so not to be kind of disheartened. So they let me labor on my own for a while because my contractions kept up, which was a great sign. Like my body, it kind of kicked my body into gear. My body knew what to do. I was having regular contractions, and they wanted to just kind of see what happened. So from about 5 o'clock till maybe 9:30 or 10 o'clock, I labored on my own, no medication, tons of contractions, really regular. We thought they were being productive. And then when they checked me at about 9, I think it was, I still hadn't made any progress. So at that point, I was in a lot of pain. I had been having contractions so much that they told me that I should just get an epidural because it might be a while. And I was terrified to get an epidural. That was half the reason I wanted a natural childbirth, is because having a needle stuck into my spine just freaked me out, and just all of the things that could go wrong. And like I said, I Googled too much. So at that point though, I didn't know how long it would be. I didn't know if there was an end in sight. So I agreed for the epidural. I was terrified. I think I asked more questions than any patient has ever asked ever. And the anesthesiologist came in, and he was really nice and fun, and he had kind of a dry sense of humor. So when I thought he was kidding, he wasn't. He said he earned his residency in a women's penitentiary, and when I asked him if he does this all the time, he kind of said no. He said he usually does surgery, and I thought he was kidding. He didn't tell me till after that he really doesn't do these often because he doesn't like doing them. He likes doing surgery, but he told me that after the fact, so it was already done. But honestly, the epidural really didn't hurt. They let my husband stay in the room, which was really helpful. Even though I kind of had my head down and I was hunched over a pillow, and I was holding the nurse's hands, and the anesthesiologist kind of talked me through it, and he told me the first numbing agent would hurt more than the actual epidural. And so he used the first needle, and it honestly really didn't hurt. I felt that little bit of like a zing down one leg, which he warned me about. Like kind of felt like a little lightning bolt, but it wasn't that painful. And then when they finally did put the epidural in, I could feel it like going in. I could feel pressure, but it wasn't painful. So I was more worried about, because they leave the catheter in your back, I was more worried about moving and it being like pulled out or hitting a nerve or doing some kind of damage. So I felt like once I got the epidural, I felt like I couldn't move. Not physically, but I felt like I just didn't want to move because I was scared I was gonna rip the cord or do something. And it really limited my range of motion, which kind of was frustrating because I was already hooked up to an IV. I'm in bed, and with an epidural, you can't get up anymore. They give you a catheter and you are stuck in bed. So, but at that point, if it was going to buy me time without having those pains of the contractions constantly, I was willing to do it, especially because they figured at this point it was going to be a long labor. So after I got the epidural, they continued to let me just labor on my own. My contractions were still really regular. And then at like 11 o'clock p.m., they put in a Foley balloon to dilate my cervix. And a Foley balloon is like a little tube with a balloon that they fill with water, and they put it up through your cervix, and then they open it, and it puts pressure on your cervix and dilates it. And then when your cervix is dilated a certain amount, it comes out. So they put the Foley balloon in, And I was warned by like all these nurses that it was going to feel like a ton of pressure. It was really going to hurt. They usually don't like to do them unless you have an epidural. And even with the epidural, you'll feel pressure and you'll feel this and you'll feel that. And they kind of freaked me out about it because I didn't want to do another cytotech because it wasn't working. And it was kind of like my next option. So I didn't really want to hear how bad it was going to hurt or, anything like that. So when they did the Foley balloon, I didn't feel a thing. I didn't even know what they were doing. I couldn't feel anything. So the epidural was working. It's 12:45 p.m. I got the epidural. I have a Foley balloon in, and we're hoping that dilates me because I didn't make any progress at the last check, which is really disappointing because that was another 4 hours. The epidural wasn't bad. Just moving on. I'm trying to sleep. And there's Billy. There's my sister Megan. There's TV that I'm not really watching. And then at 2:40 a.m., I dilated to 4 centimeters and the balloon came out, and I was really excited. I was 70% effaced, 4 centimeters, and I was making progress. It's 3:30 in the morning. I can't sleep. The Foley balloon came out, and I'm 4 centimeters. I've been in labor for 15 hours, and I'm hoping it starts speeding up at this point. Luckily I have the epidural, so I hope that stays. So that's where I'm at. So after the Foley balloon came out, they continued to let me labor all on my own kind of the rest of the night. And when they checked me again, I was only at a 5. So I had only, all night, after laboring all night with regular contractions, I had only dilated 1 more centimeter. I mean, I was excited that it was technically halfway there because I was at a 5, but I felt like I had already been in labor almost 24 hours at that point, and I was still only halfway there, so it was really frustrating. So they started the Pitocin in the morning, and I know that once you start Pitocin, it's like things get real. Like, it's like game on once you start Pitocin. And I mean, I had the epidural at this point, so I was ready to just bring it on and have this baby. And even in that morning on the 20th, my husband and I were saying, oh, today's our baby's birthday. She's going to be a Pisces. And, it was like the last day for the cutoff between Pisces and Aries. And it was the last day between winter and spring. So she was like, she's technically going to be a winter baby, and she's going to be a Pisces, and today's her birthday. And, we were just really excited. We really thought that Wednesday the 20th was going to be her birthday because I'd already been in labor 24 hours, so of course she's going to be born. Of course not. So I labored all day on the 20th with Pitocin, and I only got to a 7. And this is going into Wednesday night. I think it was about 6 or 7 o'clock p.m., and they had been checking me all day, and I hadn't progressed past a 7. I was just stuck at a 7 for, I want to say, like 6 hours on the Pitocin, and they kept increasing it, and I wasn't getting past a 7. And once they started cranking up the Pitocin, my epidural moved and failed. So all of that fear that I had about, moving and having the catheter come out or be misplaced, all came true. So there's a little button you get when you have an epidural, and you can push it, and it'll give you a little bit of like a boost. So if you're feeling it wear off, it gives you like a little bit of a boost. So I could only feel the epidural working in one leg. I could feel everything else. Like I had full feeling everywhere else, which is not how it's supposed to be. Like I could not feel my left leg at all. Like if I was touching my leg, I couldn't feel it. It just felt warm, and I just couldn't feel my left leg or move it. I couldn't move my toes at all, but just on my left leg. So I had told the nurse that, and she had me lay on my right side to try and distribute the epidural going into the other side. And it didn't work. I kept pushing the button and it wasn't working, and this is going on a couple hours. And I was actually having really intense contractions because they kept turning at the Pitocin, and the only feeling that I didn't feel was my left leg. So at about 6 or 7 o'clock at night, the anesthesiologist came back in, and he looked at my back, he looked at the catheter, and he's like, oh, your catheter's out of place. We're gonna have to redo the whole epidural. And by this point, I had been in labor for like 30 hours, and I just lost it. I felt so bad for the anesthesiologist. My mom and sister and my husband are in the room, and the anesthesiologist is in the room, and the nurse is in the room. Sorry, my video just cut off. So he started taking out the catheter, and I just lost it. I feel so bad for the anesthesiologist because this poor guy, I just started hysterically crying. And I hadn't progressed past 7 centimeters in like 6 hours, and now they just told me that I had to redo my epidural, and I was already in so much pain. And the idea of having to go through an epidural again when I was already so terrified, I just couldn't take it anymore. Like, I couldn't handle it. And so I'm hysterically crying and telling him I'm too scared to do it again. Even though it didn't hurt the first time, it's still like nerve-wracking. And after I had the epidural, I was like relieved that I did it, and I was really proud of myself. And the idea of having to do that again and be brave again after being exhausted and being in labor for 30 hours, and I hadn't slept at all, and it was just too much at this point. It was too much. They had been cranking up my Pitocin. I was in so much pain, and I couldn't handle it anymore. So I'm hysterically crying and telling him I don't know if I want to do it again, but I'm in so much pain, and if there's something else we could do. And he said that he would leave for an hour and come back, and I could decide then if I wanted to redo it. So at this point, I'm crying, I'm yelling at my mom and sister that they're gonna make me have a C-section. I was just like, I had a million thoughts running through my head, and I was just over it at this point, and no one could calm me down. My mom and sister and husband were all trying to like make me feel better and like reassure me, and I just couldn't handle it anymore. So I had 2 nurses come in, and they were like, well, why don't we turn off the lights, get some rest, we'll all come back in an hour and decide what the game plan is and if you want to redo the epidural. So they turned off the lights. My mom and sister actually left the hospital for the night because it was getting late. I think it was like 11:30 or 12 by this point. And they turned off the light, and I guess before they left, one of the nurses cranked my Pitocin up to a 20, which is the highest it can go, and I started feeling the most intense pain I've ever felt, and I had no epidural in. It had worn off hours ago. The catheter was out. I had nothing, no pain medication, nothing. And so I knew they had turned up the Pitocin, but I didn't know it was at its max. And so I'm thinking that, these are really powerful contractions, and I'm trying to lay there and trying to sleep and just power through them, because I feel like if I could just get through like an hour of these contractions, I would have definitely made progress. And sure enough, 15 minutes later, I couldn't handle the pain anymore. It was to the point where I was that girl screaming in a labor and delivery room. I never thought I would be that person. I have a really high pain tolerance, but I was physically screaming. It was in so much pain. And I hit the nurse button, and she came in, and I told her I couldn't take it anymore. I begged her to turn it down, whatever the Pitocin was. And so she said she was going to get my midwife. And in between her going to get my midwife, they both come up. My midwife comes into the room, and I immediately start projectile vomiting, like green vomit, like The Exorcist. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I was in so much pain that I just started throwing up uncontrollably. So I think then they took me seriously, and they're like, okay, like I think I was in transition at this point, because it hit me hard, and I've never felt pain like this in my entire life. I was screaming, and I had no pain medication, like nothing. So they laid me on the bed. She checked me. I was at a 9. So in that 15 minutes, I had gone from a 7 to a 9, 9 centimeters, and I was 90% effaced. And my midwife, when she was doing the check, I guess she felt a lip. Like, I guess that means the cervix didn't pull back in one spot. And so not only did she move that lip, but she stretched me to a 10. And I've never wanted to kick someone in the face more than her at that time. Being in that much pain and having someone check you during a contraction and then stretch you to a 10, I begged her to kill me. I begged someone to kill me, because I was like, I didn't think I could handle it. Like, I thought I would die from the pain. It was that bad. So luckily my husband pulled out I brought a portable fan, with me, and I didn't know if I was going to use it, but for some reason it was the perfect remedy. He sat there with the fan and it really calmed me down, and before I knew it, she said it was time to go, it was time to push, time to have this baby. And then everything just kind of felt like a blur. Like they pulled out this surgical light and there's all these people in the room, and I had the nurse on my right side and my husband on my left side, and they're both holding my leg. And I had told my husband, I said, I don't want you to hold my leg, I don't want you to help me push, I want you to stand behind my head, and I don't want you to look. And like I was very like worried about the whole thing, but when it came time to it, like he grabbed my leg, I didn't care. I was in so much pain, and luckily I asked for an oxygen mask. I highly recommend it. I'm not like a good like deep breather. Like I've done yoga and stuff, and when they're telling you to breathe deep and stuff, I get really lightheaded. So I asked for an oxygen mask, and so I put the oxygen mask on, and I'm screaming and I'm trying to breathe, and they're all kind of coaching me through it, and they didn't turn my Pitocin down. And so I can see when contractions are coming and I can feel them, and then they have me start pushing. And they were all yelling at me, and each time to push as hard as I could. And I had to I would lay down and I would take a deep breath in and I would push until they counted to 10, I think, or 5. It's all kind of a blur. And then I would get a break, and then I'd have to do it again, and I'd have to do it 3 times. And I was pushing as hard as I possibly could, and my midwife was like coaching me, saying like, get mad, and she is yelling at me, my nurse is yelling at me, my husband's yelling at me, and they're all trying to like get me to push, and I'm literally pushing to the point where I thought I was going to black out, and that was with an oxygen mask. It was just the most insane feeling. So I pushed for 45 minutes before my daughter was born, and I remember when I could feel that pressure when her head was coming down. And I didn't feel that like ring of fire that everyone talks about. I just felt like the worst pressure, and my midwife was doing that perineum stretching every time I was pushing, which I'm thankful for because I didn't tear that bad, but it was the most painful thing ever when you're having a contraction and pushing and someone's like stretching you at the same time. So I remember when she said once the head is past the pelvis, then it's easy from there. So I just kept asking her like how much, like I needed to have like an end point. I was like, how much closer do I, like how much more do I have to push? Just because I had been in labor so long, and I had maybe only slept 2 hours, and I'd been in labor for 39 hours. And I just needed to know when the end was. So I could finally feel, she said it might be on this next push, and that gave me all the power to push this last couple pushes. And so knowing that she was right there and that I was so close to not being in this much pain anymore was the perfect motivation. So I remember when I went for it, I remember I just closed my eyes and I just like knew that this was gonna be the push that her head came out. And like I pushed like I've never pushed before. Like I'm surprised my head didn't explode. And her head came out, and they told me to stop pushing. And she had the cord wrapped around her neck, which we actually knew going into it. They saw it on a sonogram and they told me, and I was really freaked out about it, but I'm actually glad I knew about it in advance because it wasn't like a shock or a surprise. Like I knew about it. And I've had so many friends that it happens to, and when they did find it on a sonogram, they told me that 40% of all babies have the cord around their neck. It's really not that big of a deal. It's not ideal, but it's not like a life or death situation usually. So when her head came out, they told me to stop pushing, and I think, I wasn't looking, but I'm pretty sure I heard them cut her cord before she was even like out. Like they told me to wait, and then they were like, okay, push. And I pushed, and she came out, and they put her on my chest for a second. She wasn't crying. She wasn't really moving. She did flinch a little bit on my chest, so I was reassured by that. But then they did have to go take her over to the left of me on like a table, and I think she had sucked in some fluid, and with the cord wrapped around her neck, she was just kind of shell-shocked. So my husband stayed with me, and you know, we were waiting for that cry, and it was terrifying that she wasn't crying yet. And I kept asking my midwife, I was like, is she okay? Like, is she okay? And I kept looking to the left, and I saw all these people working on her, but they didn't look that concerned. Like it seemed like an emergency, but not something life-threatening. It seemed like they were like diligently working, but they weren't concerned. So that made me feel better, and I could hear her like cough here and there or gasp here and there, so I could hear that she was alive. And I kept asking my midwife, like, is she okay? Like, is she okay? And she just kept saying, yeah, she's gonna be fine, she's gonna be fine. So that was reassuring. And then the moment that I heard her cry was the best moment ever. And she had the most adorable cry, which sounds insane because babies crying is not adorable, but it was just so reassuring. So then once she cried, I was so jealous. My husband got to go over and watch them weigh her and like do all that stuff. And I was laying on the table getting sewn up because I tore a little bit. They said it was superficial. It wasn't bad. I think I only got like 4 stitches. So luckily it wasn't bad because I've had people tell me they've had 4th degree tears, and that is not something I wanted to deal with. And luckily my midwife doesn't believe in episiotomies because no thank you. So finally, after they weighed her and did everything, they brought her back over and we got to do skin to skin. And she was born at 2:43 a.m., 7 pounds, 1 ounce. And we had about like 2 hours, I think, in that room before we got to go into our recovery room. And in that time, both my husband and I were exhausted. I hadn't eaten in 39 hours. I was starving. And I have to say, it was probably the most intense, insane, best, and most painful experience of my entire life. But it was all worth it because she's here safe and sound. And I can't believe, like, I still stare at her and I can't believe that she was in my belly. I can't believe that I grew a human being. It's just the most insane feeling in the world. And she looks like a perfect blend right now. I've made my husband, it's like no one can decide who she looks like. It's literally a perfect blend. Like, she has my nose, his hair, like there's just, it's like a perfect balance. I'm sure she'll probably look like one more than the other, but right now she just looks like a mixture of both of us. And she's healthy and happy, and yeah, it's crazy. So here she is. This is Lily Juliet. I just woke her up from a nap, so she's kind of out right now, but she is absolutely perfect, and we are so happy to finally have her here. Those are her lovely little newborn noises. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please be sure to subscribe to my channel for more motherhood and lifestyle videos, and I will see you next time.